name is Professor Ira Robinson, and I teach at Concordia University. Today, I'm going to be discussing my newly published book, A History of Anti-Semitism in Canada, published by Wilfrid Laurier University Press. Anti-Semitism is very much on people's minds these days. And there hardly goes a day by, and certainly there hardly goes a week by, without headlines, anti-Semitism this, accusations, counter-accusations. There is much confusion in the media, and lots of people want to know what's going on. This book is able to give a bit of perspective, because it talks not merely, as the newspapers and the media do in general, about what's happening now, but about the long patterns of anti-Semitism in Canada and elsewhere. This happens to be the first book that ties all the history of anti-Semitism in Canada together. It builds on on many other books. For instance, Irving Abella and Harold Troper wrote their None is Too Many, which has become a classic of Canadian scholarly literature, and one book that has really made a difference in the way people see things. But Abella and Troper really only concentrate on the 30s and 40s, and there is much more to say. So this book takes the reader from the pre-modern origins of anti-Jewish beliefs and actions, and goes to see what the basis is of anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic feeling in Canada from the very beginning. You might ask, why now? Well, it is a particularly appropriate time now, because there has been much good scholarship on the history of anti-Semitism in Canada, and I am able to stand on the shoulders of giants, not merely Abella and Troper, but certainly including them. I am also able, because I have laid the background for the development of anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic feeling, to look at current events, whether they be on college campuses with BDS and so on, or elsewhere in our society, and put them in a perspective. There is, as historians say, a longue durée for anti-Semitism in Canada, and some of the continuities may even be surprising. I deal in my book, among other things, with issues of Holocaust denial, and obviously Holocaust denial comes in after the Holocaust, and yet I argue in my book that there is a way of tracing Holocaust denial back even before the Holocaust. What do I mean? One of the great anti-Jewish tropes in history is the Jews cannot be trusted to say what they mean, and therefore anything that the Jews say must be distrusted, must be doubted. And this happens in pre-modern times. This happens in Canada. During the war, for instance, when the news of the Holocaust is just beginning to come out, you get an editorial in Le Devoir, which says basically, well, the Jews are giving certain statistics, if we can believe them, if they are not exaggerated in a Talmudic kind of way. In 1932, the great Canadian Jewish author and journalist A.M. Klein wrote an editorial on anti-Semitism in the Canadian Jewish Chronicle. And what he said there is that there is anti-Semitism in Canada, and it is an important phenomenon, but it is much milder. It is of a much milder variety than the kind you see in Europe. And you go now to 2015, and basically I can say the exact same thing. There is anti-Semitism in Canada, and it is a worrying phenomenon, but it also happens to be a much milder version of the anti-Semitism you see in France, for instance. And you can show it statistically just in looking at the late Robert Wistrich's magisterial book on anti-Semitism, where in the index there are hundreds, literally hundreds of references, page references to anti-Semitism in France, and only a dozen or so for Canada. Canadian anti-Semitism in perspective is what this book is about, and it importantly concentrates and foregrounds not merely the anti-Semitic acts, but their influence and their effect on the Jewish community of Canada. Because the Jewish community in Canada, for better or worse, has been significantly shaped by the existence of anti-Semitism, of anti-Semitic attitudes in business and other areas of life. And therefore, once again, it is important, it is very important for us to gain a large perspective and not merely be carried away by the emotion of current headlines. Current headlines are the building blocks of my analysis of the current situation of anti-Semitism in Canada, which you will find in the last chapter. But it is only a part, and it only makes sense and fits together when you see the entire picture from beginning to the present. And that, I think, is the great contribution of this newly published book, A History of Anti-Semitism in Canada, published by Wilfrid Laurier University Press. Thank you very much.